thank you guys so much for joining. I'm so excited to be here. We have some amazing speakers, some amazing information to share with you today. So let's go ahead and dive right into some of those behaviors that make reps win and lose. So before we actually get to the meaty part, like I said, I do want to introduce our two amazing speakers, Sal Pecoraro. I'm going to butcher your last name, Sal, so please correct me if I did say it wrong. Pecoraro. All right. And Lauren Bailey. That one's a little easier for me. And I'm excited to be joined by these two folks because they know a thing or two, or probably a lot more than that, about, all things sales excellence. So first, Sal is the Vice President of Client Technology Solutions at Data Axle. In that role, he's engaged in managing corporate-wide product and go-to-market strategies, including sales enablement. And for those of you that don't know, Data Axle is a technology company that really empowers companies to bring together the right data, the right services and technology to drive things like customer acquisition and retention, intelligence into deeper insights, and data licensing. And Sal has actually been with Data Axle for almost 23 years. Is that right, Sal? Yeah, and formerly known as Info Group. In those 23 years, Sal has really played a huge role in Data Axle's evolution as an organization and really pivotal role in their sales success. So we're super excited to hear what he has to share with us today. We are also honored to have Lauren Bailey here with us today. She is the founder and president of Factor 8. And sales leaders come to Factor 8 to get award-winning consulting, coaching, training to grow their top-line revenue, to grow their market share margins, and to scale their virtual sales teams. Lauren is amongst the top 25 most influential leaders in inside sales, top 25 sales coaches, top 35 most influential women in sales, and top 50 keynote presenters. So if you're looking for the tippity top, Lauren is here. She is your girl. And one of my things about Lauren is she is all about that girl power. So super excited to have another Lauren here. And I am Lauren Comer. I'm a senior product marketing manager here at Mindtickle. So with that, let's go ahead and talk a little bit of, get an overview of what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about readiness challenges, a little bit about that report that Savannah referenced, the State of Sales Readiness 2022. Then we're going to get into a discussion because that's why we're all here today. We want to hear from Sal and from Lauren more than anything. So let's talk about some of these readiness challenges. I will not spend too much time on the readiness challenges because you guys know what these challenges are, and I don't want to add too much salt to the wound, right? You guys are here because you don't want to know about the problems, you want to know about the solutions. But just to set a little bit of context, traditionally, organizations have really relied on more art than science when it comes to sales and driving results. And what do I mean by that? When I say that, the art side of it, I'm thinking about, the it factor of sellers, charisma, that you could just hire that person that has it, or that, or on the other, similarly, that just relationship building was really all you needed. Strong relationship building skills. You could take somebody out for the 3 martini lunch and you close a deal and here we go, right? But the reality is, and you guys know it, is those days are long gone. And there needs to be just as much science as art in that selling approach. And with how rapidly today's market changes, with how sophisticated buyers are, buyers are doing their own research long before they talk to you. you as a seller get less and less time during a buyer's cycle. So as sellers, we really need to approach it with more science and more strategy than ever before. And that is why preparing reps to sell is so challenging. And I'm not just talking about preparing in the context of, you hire someone, you onboard them, you're getting them ready to hit the field. It's how do you hit that field every single day, no matter where you are in your tenure with an organization, continuously preparing and ensuring sellers are ready. And again, I don't want to spend too much time here, but industry research only underscores this reality, right? Rep ramp time is up. Used to be around 6 months. Now it's closer to 9 to 12 months. Quota attainment is down. We're all living in the time of the Great Resignation, right? We're fighting to hire and retain the best sales talent we have. And new competitors pop up every day, which is great job security if you're in competitive intelligence, right? Bad for sellers. You're always up against somebody new. So it's our responsibility as sales leaders, as sales technology partners, to really arm sellers with the knowledge, with the behaviors, and with the skills that they need to succeed. But again, that question is, what are those knowledge and skills that make some sellers and sales teams win and others lose, unfortunately? And so, we at Mindtickle wanted to know the answer to that billion-dollar question just as much as everybody else. So we went on a quest to find out, and in doing so, we created the 2022 State of Sales Readiness Report, where we actually analyzed our own Mindtickle data across over 1 million users, over 350 companies. You can see all around the world, over 100,000 calls recorded. Really trying to hone in what are the behaviors, what are the activities that winning sales organizations are doing. And that's what we published in our State of Sales Readiness Report. And what we found, if you look at the report, there's tons of great data in there, great benchmarking tips, tricks, recommendations. But what we found consistently is that modern revenue organizations really take a comprehensive approach to sales readiness that encompasses sales enablement and training, content, how you create, how you arm your sellers with content, conversations, sales coaching, and sales performance benchmarking. And so with that, I've done a lot of talking in these last couple of minutes. Before we start diving into our conversation with Lauren and Sal, we want to get a feel from you in this poll. Savannah, if you want to cue up the poll, in the context of these 5 things: sales enablement and training, sales content, conversations, coaching, performance benchmarking, where do you have the most opportunity for improvement, or your organization have the most opportunity for improvement? So either you as a seller, or you as a sales enablement leader, or you as a sales leader, where do you see the most opportunity? And just a little bit of background on how we're going to proceed from here from a discussion perspective. I introduced that State of Sales Readiness Report, and I gave you that background because we're actually going to leverage some data points from the report as sort of a jumping off point for some of our discussion here today. So I'm going to introduce one of the data points or the findings, and then I'm going to throw it over to Sal and Lauren to give their point of view on that data point and some best practices. So Savannah, you think we got pretty good participation here on the poll?
Yep, looks good.
All right, cool. So it looks like, let's share the results. Are you guys seeing the results? So it looks like 37% have the most challenges with sales enablement and training, and then pretty split between sales content and conversations. 10% around coaching. That's interesting. I usually see that one be a little bit higher, and 13% around performance benchmarking. So thank you. The reason why I was curious is, we want to ensure that as we're having those conversations, into our discussion, we take that into account. So let's go ahead and jump into our first insight here. So our first insight, and I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, is that readiness requires continuous enablement. So the first data point is that less than 14% of enablement programs are focused on onboarding. Which to some of you may be a surprise, for some of you may not be, right? For me, admittedly, it was kind of a surprise because oftentimes when I'm talking to sales organizations and sales enablement teams, there is still a very heavy focus on onboarding because it is critical, right? But the reality is, what we see across our customers is that the vast majority, as you can see here, are actually focused on non-onboarding enablement programs because of understanding the value of that continuous learning and the need to continuously keep your reps armed. Hand in hand with that, another data point that we found had to do with ongoing practice. 2 to 3 sellers typically, on average, complete 2 to 3 hands-on practice exercises every year. So again, think about virtual role plays. Think about whether that's video, written, what have you, ensuring that your reps have ample opportunity for hands-on practice. And then spaced reinforcements. We typically see on average our customers doing 3 to 4 spaced reinforcement exercises a year. And just a little context, what we mean by spaced reinforcement. Spaced reinforcements essentially is taking a topic or question and continuously pushing it to an individual at a cadence that's scientifically proven to boost retention. So essentially, you're going to keep asking somebody the same questions over and over until they finally get it. And doing it in a way that's fun and interactive. So we see a lot of our customers doing that because 90% of sales reps 90% of information is forgotten by a rep within 30 days. So what we're trying to do here is overcome that. So with that, I want to ask, I'll start with Sal, and then I'll have Lauren also answer. What strategies do you use to create a culture of continuous enablement? Or what do you coach organizations that you work with on that?
Yeah, thanks, Lauren. So I think what we have focused on is that I think organizations fail when their enablement is not focused on the individual rep's needs, right? So we all have a lot of content, but what we're trying to do is we're starting to define what good looks like at the rep level. We're building an ideal rep profile, and then we're measuring this profile with the sales readiness index to understand individual reps' strengths and weaknesses, right? What are they? What do they need? They may be great at product knowledge. They may not be good at process, like getting the close or time management or, pushing back on objections. And so once we have this index in place, it'll tell us where we need to focus and what content we need to have available to coach reps on those weaknesses. And so every rep is different. So as products and services and sales activities are continually changing, the scores are going to change. And this will allow us to pivot into what reps need for continuous learning and sales enablement improvements. And so that's the approach we're using.
Awesome. So really understanding on a to be able to continuously enable people, you need to understand where they have the area of opportunity to begin with, right?
Right. Enable them on their weaknesses, right? Don't waste time enabling on strengths that they have already.
That's great. So coupling that continuous enablement approach with an individualized approach as well.
Exactly.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Lauren, what do you have to add?
Yeah, I would love that, Sal, right? So because then I can grab what I need. So it's available to me on demand, what I need, when I need it. And that's, I think, how you get so much more buy-in from people about wanting to take part in training. Because I have to tell you, the number one thing you'll hear from a rep at any single level is, oh, no, I don't need that. Right? Oh, no. That's for everybody else. I don't need any help with those skills. particularly enjoyed that over the last 2 years as, hundreds of thousands of field sellers decided that they didn't need help with virtual selling skills, right? No, we don't really need that, but we really do. Here's something else to consider. I think that if you're going to create a culture of enablement, it requires 3 things at a minimum. The first one is really great content, because you're not going to build a whole culture about people getting excited to do training, to Sal's point, that's not for them, but bad training. And we've all experienced bad training, and nobody's excited to do that more. I think the second thing you need after great content is repetition. And Lauren, that goes to your point about your spaced reinforcement, right? To build mastery, that repetition. I can't hear it once and all of a sudden be able to do it. And I know that's shocking to a lot of managers, especially new managers. I hear this because they're frustrated, right? I tell my reps what to do, but I don't see it happening. So repetition is critical. There's also a difference between telling and training, but don't let me get on that soapbox. The third thing that's really critical is reinforcement. And this is where we spend a ton of our time. It's critical if you want skills to get used, be sticky, and actually make a difference, to have managers involved heavily with the rep learning, training, and coaching. 20 years ago, when I was running training teams and building content for corporations, after the training, I would just tell the managers, here's what we covered, try to reinforce it. And these days, we know, right, from bad experiences, that doesn't cut it. So we require managers to attend the rep training. Then we arm them with activities to run in huddles, conversations to have during team meetings, submission quizzes and activities that they have to grade. And we go further and give them coaching cheat sheets and the call forms that match. And right, so we try to keep the organization engaged with this, 1 or 2 topics at a time, and give the managers an entire month to really dig in and make sure that the skills are used. So Sal, almost exactly opposite of what you're saying, right? There's always skills on demand. There's a fly that keeps going right in front of my camera. It's hilarious. See if you can catch it. It's like doing loops around my video camera. One skill at a time, it keeps an organization focused on it, and nobody gets to hide, and the managers get to really dig in. So 2 different sides of the coin there.
I love that. To your point, 2 different sides of the coin, but still achieving that continuous, creating that culture. And you're right. There's something about the word culture, right? It includes 360 degrees of people, right? So we can't just talk about the training. We can't just talk about the sellers. We need to make sure that we're arming those frontline managers with the tools that they need to be able to effectively reinforce and drive that behavior change as well. And we'll get to talk about that a little bit in the coaching section. But I think that's something that we often skip over, right? And to your point, it's so often you can hear, well, we trained them on that. Why are we not seeing that? We walked them through our new messaging. Why are they not using it? Well, did we give them ample opportunities for hands-on practice to actually make sure that they could articulate that new messaging? Did we give them lots of examples of what success looks like from the field? So there's so many more facets, and it's, so often it can be easy for us to be like, well, we trained and we're going to check that box. Yeah. Right. We're going to move on to the next thing, when in reality, if we want to create lasting change and behavioral change, we need to ensure that we're taking that, full, robust approach and reinforcing and giving hands-on practice.
I love that you say check that box, because we use that term as horrible training, frankly, around here, right? Oh, it's check the box training, which means somebody isn't interested in actual change. They just need to check the box, right? It's like every firm's sexual harassment training. Like, you're required to go through it. Let's do the check the box training. But if you look at behavior change and you study human performance improvement, you'll find that training, the skills themselves, are a very small part of it. Now, they're critical, but so much more surrounds behavior change, not just reinforcement, right? But the coaching. What about the gamification? What about compensation? What about reward and recognition? And even more important, this is why Sal's such a stud, is the leader, right? A culture is what the leader accepts.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to have a learning culture and a leader who doesn't care anything about it, you have a problem.
Yeah. And I think the important part that I was mentioning was measurement, right? So you can be reinforcing training all you want. If it's not sinking in, you're not going to know that just because someone's taken something 5 times, right? So we're trying to measure the effectiveness of that. Are their skills improving over time, right? Month over month, week over week. Do they need more in this area? Do they need less? Have they had gaps somewhere else? And so while we're trying to provide the appropriate training, and to some extent it's on demand, and some extent it's scheduled training, but it's all about the measurement, right? Are they getting what they need? Are they improving? Are we focused on the right areas? Because you do have a bunch of different competencies you need to focus on, right? It's not just about products, it's about process, and it's about negotiations, and it's about objection handling, right? There's a lot of different things to cover. And so we're trying to measure on all those points to see where those gaps really do exist at the individual rep level, and then pushing the appropriate content until we see improvement in that area. It could be the same issue month over month, and we'll try different strategies to get it corrected. But that's really what we want to understand is it working? Does it tie to sales revenue and sales force? Does it tie to deal close? Does it tie to shorter sales cycles, right? Not just, they are really great at talking about the product. Is it affecting the actual sales results?
Yeah.
That's the key.
No, I think that I love that. And it actually kind of brings me back to something that Lauren said too, because, Lauren, you mentioned 1 to 2 topics, right? Focus on, and I think people can hear continuous learning, right? And think that we're constantly just bombarding people with stuff to know, all the time. And maybe in some environments that might be the case, but to Sal's point and to your point, really honing in on those things that do make a difference, and not enabling for the heck of enabling, right? But enabling on those things that are actually going to translate to in the field results and drive the needle from a revenue perspective. So, and I love that, Sal, that you're able to measure that, right? And that you're able to not just, look beyond the traditional completion rates and engagement. You're looking at what is the actual impact that this enablement's having. So I think that's awesome. Anything else to add before we jump over to the next topic? We could probably spend an hour on each of these. So I think that's the challenge, right? All right, so let's go on to insight number 2. And I think this goes hand in hand with everything that we've already talked about. And the theme of this is that to really compete for seller attention, we got to make it short and we got to pack a punch, right? This was very interesting to me. On average, 85% of sellers only engage with learning and content in the Mindtickle platform for fewer than 10 minutes at a time. You take into account this is an average of times that they come in and have a learning session. So there's obviously going to be times where they come and they sit through a whole, longer training. But what we see is that those longer trainings are fewer and far between, right? As they should be, because, we have to compete for sellers' attention. Regardless of role, everybody's busy. Everybody has a million things going on, but sellers in particular have more competing priorities than anyone else. So discussion point 2, how do you capture and keep sellers' attention? I'll start with Lauren this time, and then Sal, you can go.
Oh, there's a billion good and bad things out there. We were talking in the chat. Clay's like, I've seen a lot of years of bad content. So I'll tell you the first way to lose it is really long, boring recorded PowerPoints. So sorry, training leaders. I know that's cheap and it's easy, but it sucks and it's not fun for anybody. I think the second thing that's most important is you got to get buy-in right away. Okay. So if you want a seller to pay attention, they got to know the SWIFT. So what's in it for them? So this training is going to impact this skill, which will impact this part of the conversation, which will impact this metric, KPI, or most importantly, result in cash dollars in my pocket. So let's talk about what those key results are. Buy-in is skipped way too often. Trainers will spend all the time on credibility, right? Here's why I know everything. And that used to be a more important part of the process, but with our generations today, it's really more about what's in it for me. I don't care who you are, you old dinosaur. Just tell me what I'm going to get out of this. Next thing I think is really, really critical to capture sellers' attention is to get right to the heart of the matter. You need to show it in action. So every single one of our classes, we're using recorded calls. So you might think that this doesn't pertain to you until I play your call at the beginning of the training and you hear that skill not being used by yourself or one of your peers. Because that's also some of that mindset that happens is everybody else needs this training except me because I'm perfect and everything's great. So when you use real recorded calls, right, and you get right to the heart of the matter, that's when I can't ignore it anymore. So we try to do everything we can to stay out of theory. Let's not discuss it in esoteric, theoretical, fluffy terms. Dive straight into the weeds and show me a call where it's not being used in the result and where it is being used in the result. And I'm going to get excited to do better and change that skill. So in addition to micro learning, which is that 10 minutes at a time, make it interesting, make it immediately impactful, get right down to the tactics of it and teach me how to do it better. Don't give me a script. Teach me how to do it better. I'm stopping at, what was that, 17? You're up, Sal.
Your turn, Sal.
Yeah, I mean, and we struggle with this a little bit because a lot of our content was like 25, 30 minutes long. We tried to cover many different things, product capabilities, positioning, contact information, what the internal process is. We tried to kind of probably do a little too much in one thing. So we are trying to work on shortening that down, making it more attention grabbing. But I think that is an important piece, is the more bite-sized nuggets. I think a lot of what we want to focus on this year, though, is role plays and coaching. And so again, the call intelligence platform gives us a lot of information to show what people are struggling with, right, or what they're not doing well. And so those are teachable moments, and those are also able to be translated into content to show the rest of the team, hey, look at how salesperson A killed it when he got this question, right? You guys should do just like this. Or the reps themselves could say, I had this question come up. I really struggled with it. How would you guys have handled it? Right? And we can share that out. And so these little quick updates and these little quick role plays, I think, are going to be helpful because, again, we're focused on things like, what does good look like? What should I have done? How would it, how could I have made this better or different? And so I think that, these type of platforms enable that capability. And those things are going to come up all the time. And sometimes there'll be repetitive things and we can kind of reuse. And other times they'll be changing, right? So we'll be able to pivot and adjust as those new issues come up. I think that's, some of the ways we're trying to keep it engaging.
Yeah, I think that's key. So one thing that you guys are both consistently saying is using actual field data, right? Using actual, calls, whether you're playing them for a group or, to Sal, your point, you're pulling them into an enablement program, you're pushing them out to people on Fridays as an example of something that went well. There's so many ways that you can do it, but again, it letting the customer and their peers speak on your behalf rather than you telling them what to do, letting that speak for you. I think that is huge. I think another thing, that we didn't really talk about, but I think is also important, is just making sure that your content, yes, we're talking about micro learning and being able to just learn things in short periods, right? But being creative about the formats that we're doing, right? We have so many customers that are pushing podcasts out, like 5-10 minute podcasts, that it goes to goes to their mobile app. People can listen to it on the go. People can listen to things offline. People can participate in role plays offline, whether, what have you, or watch their training offline. I think things like that are so important because I, as a learner, I listen to podcasts while I'm working out. while I'm on an airplane, while I am cleaning my house, right? And because unfortunately, that's the time that I have, right, to focus on my learning and development. And so putting, structuring and taking some of those approaches, I think can only help you, meet your sellers in more places. But then to your point, Lauren, ensuring that we are making sure that it's gonna be worth their time, right? Right out of the gates, they're gonna know what's in it for them. What am I gonna do differently? So I think that's great. Anything else to add before we move on to the next subject? All right. And I see some good participation here in the chat. I love it. We will make sure that we hit on those points. So next is coaching. Like we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. I love coaching. It's one of the ones that are, really gets me excited. And here the insight is really that ad hoc deal coaching isn't enough, which may seem obvious. But the reality is it's mainly what's still happening in the field. So 85% of reps reported being coached on open deals. So, let's say whether that's their manager swooping in to help them or, very tactical coaching on what they're going to do in the confines of this specific deal. But only 24% of reps report being coached on skills. And that's a little bit scary because we're talking about how, you teach a man to fish, right? He can feed himself, right? It's kind of that concept here. So how do we focus on those underlying skills so that they can continue to improve into the future? So, how do you guys, and we'll start with Sal this time, how do you enable sales managers to really coach on skills? And I think this goes back to also just, creating that buy-in and creating that culture of coaching.
Yeah. So again, we do hire in certain skills, right? Some of the sales people we hire are tenured reps that have been in the field for a while. We do want them to have basic capabilities of being able to handle account planning and negotiation. But there are always areas of improvement. And so again, that's why we're trying to put the readiness index in place, is to understand where the weak spots are. And so we want to understand folks that need help in certain areas. They're great up to this certain point, and then they struggle a little bit here. And so what are those kind of customized coachings that we can put in place that are, kind of deal specific, and then some that are just more general process driven. And so, the coaching piece also is for internal process. We see like people sometimes struggling with Salesforce capabilities or with, other internal platforms. And so we want to make sure we're enabling them to get through those processes as well. And sometimes just putting out a guide that they read the steps, may not be enough. And so we're trying to, again, get our hands around it from the specific pain points in the specific areas, and then make those into repeatable things if they make sense for everyone else to have as standard content.
Got it. Lauren?
I'm passionate like you are, Lauren, about coaching. I think the reason I'm most passionate about coaching is that I am naturally a horrific coach, just horrific. And
hey, self-awareness is the first step, right? So
I'm not alone. Sales Management Association recently ranked call coaching as a sales manager's #1 worst skill. And I get to work with thousands of sales managers every year, and I will tell you that they definitely resemble that remark. I'm in good company. Top reps become managers, and top reps' inherent skill base is like kryptonite to being an inherently great coach. One does not naturally become the other. So my #1 tip, if you want to create better coaching in your organizations and more coaching in your organizations, is you've got to teach your sales managers how to do it. Okay. And great call coaching training is not fast. My first call coaching class was like 3 hours long, and now it's 24. That's how long it takes to change this behavior. And it has to address not just what good looks like, but how do I get to it? All right. The sales management's job is the busiest job in the entire world. And unfortunately, there are very few skill-based emergencies. There are deals that aren't closing. There are upset customers. There are product issues, but nobody wakes up at midnight and says, ah, crap, I don't know that. And suddenly coaching rises to the top of the list. Everything takes its place. So we've got to teach the how to and the why to and when to, and help them free up the time to get there. Then my last tip is that we saw an enormous increase in coaching that was happening when we created sales managers tools that accompanied the content. So if we teach a class on better virtual call openings, then the managers get that training, and they also get tools that go with it, including a call coaching guide, right down to the freaking questions to ask in the call coaching session. You have to make it fast and easy for sales managers to even get started on a behavior change.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with what Lauren said. I think another point is there's not a one size fits all, because we do have different groups. So we have our business development reps that are making cold calls. We've got our more experienced executive sales reps or enterprise sales reps that are kind of taking the deal the rest of the way. We've got account directors and account managers who are nurturing live clients, but also cross-selling and upselling and kind of moving the ball down the field as well. And so all three of those require some level of coaching, but it's different depending on the group. And so we're making sure we don't have a kind of one size fits all approach, but trying to tailor it to the various individual groups.
Yeah. I think one thing that I see, I love everything. I have a couple of things that I want to double back on that both of you said, but I think one thing that I see sometimes in organizations is that we can't seem to get out of sales managers' way, right? To let them do coaching. And what I mean by that is when you look at how sales managers are spending their time, we've really put a lot of administrative work on them in the context of pipeline, running reports and pipeline reviews and so there's also a component of how in that area, from like a revenue operations perspective, how do we make their lives easier so that they can have more time to focus on coaching. So I think that's that's something to think about, because I think when we talk to sales managers, and I'm sure you guys are the same, everybody wants to do more coaching, right? Everybody understands that they're part of their job and their responsibility. But the reality is they either feel like they don't have time, so they need tools and processes to make it easier, or to Lauren's point, both of your point, they don't necessarily know how to coach, right? And so I love that idea of, when you created training or you create a piece of content, to also have an accompanying piece of content for the coaches that say, how do you reinforce this behavior in your coaching sessions and in the field? Because we can't assume that they just automatically have that connection in their heads, right? So I think that's a really big piece of it. But yeah, I think, I am very passionate about coaching because I've had wonderful coaches and I've had not so wonderful coaches, right? And I'm one of those, statistics that we all read of what's one of the number one reasons, or the number one reason why people often leave organizations. It's often, their manager. So that manager really has such a pivotal role in the success of the seller, but the success of the organization as well. Any other thoughts or anything to come back on before we hit on the next subject?
Well, you've got some love in the chats happening from who I'm going to guess are sales managers saying, yes, less admin, less admin. And for the enablement leaders who are listening to this, it's critical, right? Listen, I've been both, all right? And when I was a training manager, because I'm too old, it was before enablement. When I was a training manager, it drove us crazy that the sales managers didn't play more and didn't do more. And when I was a sales manager, it drove us crazy that everybody dumped it on our lap because we were so busy. So how can you partner and make it faster and easier for your sales managers to play? And how can you make it more important as well? So one example is that we have worked with companies who have the managers partner with the vendor, and in this case, the vendor was us, on certifying the reps. Now, the certifications are important to people in their careers. So the managers can build their own certification, but then they have to give the input to certify the reps. Now, how do we make that faster and easier for them? That's how we made it more important. To make it faster and easier, you give them the tools, right? Here are the forms. Here are the questions. Here are the calls. Now we're going to do it together. Let's help make it faster and easier for you. Let's carve out the time, right? Let's help your leaders know the most important thing happening this week or this month or this whatever, right? We're guarding Monday afternoons or whatever it is to make this happen. As enablement leaders, we can help with all of that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it's, coaching like anything else. It's like, I think of the analogy of like planting a garden, right? If you go, you plant and you got to water it. You're going to have to water it for a while before you start seeing the fruits of your labor. But I think once sales coaches start to see the fruits of their labor, it only builds that enthusiasm and builds that momentum of why coaching is so important, and using, to your point, having tools, having processes that then enable you to quantify the impact of coaching is huge, right? To really keep that wheel turning. So
yes, it's just like Sal was saying, quantifying the results of training. It's one and the same. We like to see the end results, but unfortunately, we don't often measure it. It's qualitative, right? So if we can get our QA forms, if we can get our wins, if we can get our knowledge checks, if we can get contests and gamification, how can we start to celebrate little wins with knowledge gains, with learning, with doing it better? Now that's creating an enablement culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think using a technology that you can then track all this coaching so that being able to quantify it, right?
Right. That's
huge.
hard.
Having it all just loosey goosey out in the ether is not going to help you quantify it. So that's a big piece. So let's go ahead and jump into our next insight. And this has to do with something that we talked a lot about already earlier, which is leveraging conversations to really work it beyond the call itself. So a couple things we found. And I guess this is more about the call itself than the beyond. But we found reps win more when they share the mic during calls and they leverage meeting intelligence. So again, may seem very self-explanatory, but again, not always the case. So we found that on average, the average customer talk time in disco calls is 51%. I argue that it should be much higher than that, but that's okay. We found that on average, reps share 3 calls per month with peers amongst their team, which I think goes back to what we were saying before, leveraging those in-field, activities to foster collaboration, that sort of thing. We also found that on average, reps leave 2 comments per month on their peers' calls. So they're going in, they're listening to what other people are doing. And we found that on average, reps share 7 calls externally per month. And so to me, that means making your call work for you in the context of your buying cycle, right? So I will start with, I think, Lauren this time, on how do you see top reps leveraging sales calls beyond the confines of the meeting?
Of the meeting itself. I thought that was really cool. I was busy jotting it down. They're sharing outside the organization. So like sending a copy to the customer, for instance.
Sending a recording, sending a snippet of the recording, the transcript, what have you. Mm-hmm.
That's super cool. I love that. I'm in the training and behavior change business, so I love it even more that they're sharing internally and making comments internally. I just think there's no better weapon for sales enablement than using real recorded calls. So the number one suggestion I can make in this is leveraging them in call libraries. So we like to organize it by skill, right? So when a rep is out looking for, the example I used earlier was a better introduction, right? Let's go this time with a better voicemail. Then I like to have libraries of voicemails, and I like to have the good, the bad, and the ugly in there so that people can learn from all of those. So we'll do it by skill in our training. And then right next month, I'm working on something different, and there's the call library. And I can listen to real examples of what it should sound like, but also reality of maybe what it often or too often sounds like instead. So that's my favorite way to leverage calls. My favorite training use of a call is the pause game. I love this. So I think all too often rep onboarding takes the time it takes. And I love learning from you in this, Lauren, that it's longer now, unfortunately. I'm sure our pandemic helped with that. But onboarding takes a while, not because always we don't know what to do, but we don't know when to do it. And using call recordings in the pause game solves that. So we start a call, right? We play 30 seconds, pause, and we ask two questions. Number one, what is the customer thinking? Critical, because we are so busy at the beginning. We can't get out of our own heads, right? Your first 50 calls, go up to a rep after the first 50 calls and say, how did it go? And if they're honest, they're gonna say, I have no freaking idea. Like it was just, right? The whole time.
It's a blur. They blacked out. They blacked out.
Yep. Exactly. So the pause game slows it down, right? And so you ask number one, what's the customer thinking? Which is so important. Get out of your head and into theirs. Nothing's going to help you more. And then the second thing is, what would you do next? And the ahas that happen are amazing, right? They're like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to use that value prop. Okay, gotcha. Oh, wait a minute. I'm losing the customer. The engagement's down. What would I do next? Oh, this is where I use those questions you taught me. That's what I do next. So it's my favorite game to play with recordings. It doesn't even have to be their recording. Any call will do. Zach.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, call intelligence has really been a game changer. It's certainly been one of the things that we're using the most and what we're most focused on. So having access to these call AI powered transcripts and metrics and analytics, it allows us to drill down into calls, to search for terms and keywords, to see what went right, what went wrong. It allows us to, going back to coaching, right? Provide general coaching like, hey, you didn't ask enough questions, or you need to reduce your monologues because you're not giving the clients enough time to speak, and you improve your listening skills, and general things like that, where we can put some content together to reinforce those behaviors. And then more specific things like objection handling or going for the close or soft close or something. And so those type of tools give us so much data and just allow us to really drill down into these things. I'm with you, Lauren, on the call library, because what we've done is instituted a series of folders where we want our reps to put into these various folders that each have a topic, good and bad examples, right? And to that end, we'll be shortly instituting a contest that once a week we're going to go out and pick the best call recording to try to, again, encourage this behavior. And so we feel that's a great way for them to, get some street cred, show how great they handled something, or again, to ask for help, something that didn't go so well. And then have all these libraries of searchable material that they can go back in and look at things and re-listen to things. And so I think it's been super important. Another great aspect of Beyond the Call is extending it out to things like product teams, right? So when a client is talking about a competitor and they're going on and on about product and feature and all these things, it's great to let that call go right out to our product team and say, listen to the way they were talking about our competitor. What's our response to that? Like, what's our features that sound like this or that do the same things? So that ability to share those things out like that, to share with the strategy team and the agency teams. Because a lot of things are about tone and inflection as well in these calls. I can hear literally how it was said and how it sounded really important to this person. And so I think the combination of those things, being able to get the metrics from the AI, being able to put these hard and soft coaching skills in place for the things the AI floats to the top, and other things that are more process or skill related. And then the libraries, I think those are all great things that, let us leverage things outside of the call. make the most value out of the time that was spent talking to prospects and to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you hit on that, the value to the rest of the organization as well, right? Because that's something that we see a lot. Like we personally, competitive intelligence, sharing it with the product team. I, as a product marketer, I get so much out of these calls. So yes, I think it's helpful for the sellers to know that other functions are also going to glean insights from this. And one thing to what Lauren said is it's all a blur, right? And part of why a lot of times I feel like it is a blur for people is because they're trying to think ahead, right? They're trying to take notes of what the person's saying. They're trying to think ahead. What I find call intelligence also does for a seller is helps them be more present, right? They can be more present and listen and pick up on those buying cues, pick up on those emotional cues, and then ask better questions when they're not so in their heads and trying to write so many notes, because they don't have to worry about the notes. The notes are going to be there. They can go back, they can listen to the call, they can get a transcript, so I think there's huge value there for the seller that we focus so much on, like the insights that you're going to be able to get as an organization, when in reality, this is a really great note-taking tool for sellers.
Transcript. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I am going to go ahead. I'm going to share again. I don't think we're going to get to the last topic, which was around content. So I'm sorry for anyone that was super wanting to talk about content. We were talking more around marketing content than anything, and getting the sales team to use content. If you want to talk content, I know I'm willing to chat anytime, and I'm sure Lauren and Sal would also make themselves available. But I just want to, first off, thank you guys, because I think this was really fun. Did you guys have fun? I had fun.
That was great.
It doesn't take much for me to have fun. But more than anything, I hope the audience enjoyed it. If you have questions after, please, like I said, feel free to reach out, find us on LinkedIn. I love this time with you guys because I think Lauren and Sal had such great insights, and I truly, truly appreciate them taking time out of their busy schedules, because everything we're talking about, all those challenges, they live those challenges too. So having to take time out of their schedule, I appreciate that immensely. So thank you guys for that. Really quick, again, Mindtickle, we sponsored this session. More than anything, we just wanted to make sure that you guys could take away some tips and some tricks today that you can leverage in your organization. We are here to help organizations be ready for whatever the field throws at you. We want to help you increase knowledge. We want to help you understand and reinforce behaviors and to adapt to change. So Mindtickle is here to partner with you no matter where you are in your journey. And we have the great privilege of partnering with some amazing companies, hundreds of world-class companies, as it says here, Data Axle being one of them. And we'd love the privilege to talk to you about that as well at some point. And also, if you would like to read that State of Sales Readiness report that we've referenced a number of times, we will be sending, I believe, Savannah, keep me honest, I think we'll be sending out a link to it. But if not, here's a QR code. You can also find it on the Mindtickle website. We have a really awesome landing page. It's interactive. It's super fun. So I hope you guys all, hop over there, benchmark yourselves, and reach out if you have any questions. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Savannah to close us out. And thank you again, Lauren and Sal.
Nice job, Lauren. Thank you. Good work. That was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining and spending this hour with us. Again, if you have any questions for anyone that you just heard, just feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn. We are always open for conversation. Again, we look forward to spending some time with you next week for our next upcoming live events. Feel free to reach out with any other questions, and if not, have a great day.